It's official. Giannis is leaving the Bucks for the Warriors. Sources say it all started after Milwaukee waived Damian Lillard, a move that clearly didn't sit well with Giannis. He even posted this cryptic tweet.
Is this going to be enough to keep Giannis in Milwaukee, who's been mum on his future with the team?
Well, looks like we just got our answer. But trust me, Giannis's bouncing wasn't just about Dame. Behind the scenes, there's a lot more at play. Let's break it down. The earthquake that shook Milwaukee. On July 1st, 2025, the Milwaukee Bucks shocked the entire NBA universe with a move so bold, so unprecedented, that even seasoned analysts struggled to grasp what had just happened. And while the front office called it a business decision, Giannis Antetokounmpo may have seen it as the final straw. The Milwaukee Bucks made the stunning decision to waive Damian Lillard, a 9-time All-Star and one of the most prolific scorers in NBA history, stretching his remaining $113 million contract over 5 years to create space for signing center Miles Turner to a 4-year, $107 million deal.
Well, we have some breaking news from Sean Sharania that is very interesting, which is the Milwaukee Bucks have signed Miles Turner, which is a true stunner of a move on a variety of levels.
But this isn't just another roster move, folks. This is the story of how a franchise's desperate attempt to salvage their championship window may have inadvertently triggered the most seismic shift in NBA power dynamics we've witnessed in decades. To understand the true gravity of this situation, we need to dive deep into the events that led to this earth-shattering moment. Picture this. Just 2 years ago, the Milwaukee Bucks were celebrating what they believed would be the dawn of a new championship era. They had acquired Damian Lillard in a blockbuster 3-team trade, giving up Drew Holiday, Grayson Allen, a 2029 first-round pick, and pick swaps in 2028 and 2030. The basketball world held its breath as two of the most dominant forces in the game, Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, joined forces in what appeared to be a match made in basketball heaven. But as we've learned time and time again in this unforgiving league, even the most perfect plans on paper can crumble spectacularly when reality comes knocking at your door. The integration of Lillard into Milwaukee's system was fraught with complications from the very beginning. Reports indicated that Lillard spent much of the 2023-24 season struggling with how the Bucks functioned on the offensive end, creating friction that would ultimately contribute to significant organizational changes, including the firing of head coach Adrian Griffin despite the team holding the second-best record in the Eastern Conference at the time. The warning signs were there for anyone willing to look closely enough. The chemistry that everyone expected to ignite between Lillard and Giannis never quite materialized in the way that Milwaukee's front office had envisioned. Lillard's usage rate dropped dramatically from 33.1% in his final Portland season to just 26.9% with Milwaukee, while Giannis saw his usage rate decrease from 37.3% to 32.2%. These weren't just statistical anomalies. They represented a fundamental failure to integrate two superstars into a cohesive offensive system that maximized both of their talents. The situation became even more complicated when you consider the human element of this story. Lillard had never requested a trade in his career until he asked to leave Portland, and he had specifically preferred to join the Miami Heat. The fact that he found himself in Milwaukee, a smaller market city far from his preferred destination, trying to make the best of a situation that was rapidly becoming untenable, added layers of complexity to an already difficult integration process. But the real catalyst for this unprecedented move came in the form of a devastating injury that would change everything. The 2024-25 season had already been a roller coaster of emotions for Lillard and the Bucks organization. Earlier in the season, Lillard had been diagnosed with deep vein thrombosis, a blood clot in his right calf, which sidelined him for the final 14 games of the regular season. His recovery from that condition was described by doctors as unprecedented in its speed, with medical professionals expressing amazement at how quickly he was able to return to basketball activity. Then came the moment that would change everything. During Game 4 of the 2025 NBA playoffs against the Indiana Pacers, Damian Lillard suffered a torn left Achilles tendon, a non-contact injury that occurred while he was trying to secure an offensive rebound. The sight of Lillard crumpling to the floor, immediately grabbing his left leg and ankle, sent chills down the spine of every basketball fan watching. This wasn't just any injury. This was the type of catastrophic setback that can derail careers, especially for players in their mid-30s. The medical implications were immediate and severe. An MRI revealed the full extent of the damage, confirming that Lillard would require surgery and face a recovery timeline of 6 to 12 months, with medical experts suggesting an average return time of 10 months. For a 35-year-old player already dealing with the natural decline that comes with age, this injury represented more than just a temporary setback. It potentially threatened the remainder of his prime years and raised serious questions about his ability to return to his previous level of performance. The emotional toll of the injury was captured perfectly in Giannis's post-game interview, where he spoke about watching his teammate go down.
Especially for a guy like Dame that he's a competitor. You know, he wants to play in big games. He wants to help the team win. And when you see like a guy like that not able to, walk on his own, you kind of, this might be serious.
The raw emotion in Giannis's voice as he described that moment revealed just how devastating this injury was, not just for Lillard, but for the entire organization's championship aspirations. What makes this story even more compelling is the context surrounding Lillard's injury and the timeline of events that followed. The injury occurred just as the Bucks were beginning to show signs of the chemistry and synchronization that had been missing throughout the regular season. In the few playoff games where both Giannis and Lillard were healthy and playing together, glimpses of their potential partnership were finally beginning to emerge. Now here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. As Lillard lay injured and facing an uncertain future, the Milwaukee Bucks found themselves in an impossible position. They had already traded away multiple first-round picks to acquire Lillard. They had used up virtually all of their salary cap space, and now their second-best player was facing a year-long rehabilitation process with no guarantee of returning to his previous level of performance. The financial implications alone were staggering. They were looking at paying maximum salary to a player who might not contribute meaningfully for the entirety of the next season. The decision-making process within the Bucks organization during this period must have been absolutely agonizing. On one hand, they had invested heavily in Lillard, both in terms of assets traded and emotional capital. On the other hand, they were facing the very real possibility that Giannis Antetokounmpo, their franchise cornerstone and two-time MVP, might lose patience with the organization's ability to build sustainable championship contenders around him. But the most shocking revelation came from the reactions within the organization itself. While Lillard himself reportedly welcomed the release and viewed it as an opportunity to become a free agent 2 years earlier than planned, allowing him to rehab in Portland surrounded by his family while maintaining his full financial compensation, the response from the franchise's cornerstone player was far more concerning and would ultimately prove to be the most significant aspect of this entire saga. NBA insider Chris Haynes broke the news that would send shockwaves through the basketball world. Giannis Antetokounmpo was not pleased with the team's decision to waive Damian Lillard.
Giannis wasn't happy about what they did yesterday, trading for Miles Turner.
The implications of this disconnect between player and organization cannot be overstated, especially considering Giannis's history of loyalty and commitment to the Milwaukee franchise. The implications of Giannis's displeasure cannot be overstated. This is a player who has been with the Milwaukee Bucks for 12 seasons, averaging 23.9 points, 9.9 rebounds, and 5.0 assists per game over his career. He's a two-time MVP winner, a championship winner, and Finals MVP who led the Bucks to their first NBA title since 1971. This is not a player whose concerns can be dismissed lightly, nor is it someone who typically expresses public dissatisfaction with organizational decisions. What makes Giannis's reaction even more significant is the context of his recent comments about his future and his increasing openness about evaluating his options. Reports indicate that Giannis has been open-minded about potentially playing elsewhere after 12 seasons with the Bucks, and he has been closely observing how committed the organization is to winning another championship.
Giannis Antetokounmpo was open-minded about whether his best fit is in Milwaukee or elsewhere. I have not felt a shift from that mentality.
The waiving of Lillard, particularly without his apparent input or approval, sends a message that the front office is willing to make unilateral decisions that directly impact the team's championship aspirations without consulting their most important player. But here's where the story becomes even more intriguing and sets the stage for what could be the most significant player movement in recent NBA history. On the same day that news broke about Giannis's displeasure, he posted a cryptic message on social media with the caption, "Mood 100 inches along," with what appeared to be a meme of himself smoking a cigar with the words, "I don't know what's going on right now, man," suggesting his emotional state regarding the franchise's recent decisions. This type of public expression of frustration is completely out of character for a player who has typically kept his feelings about organizational matters private, making it all the more significant as a potential signal of his growing dissatisfaction. The timing of these events is absolutely crucial to understanding the broader narrative that's beginning to unfold. The Milwaukee Bucks' decision represents what many are calling the most expensive panic move in NBA history. By stretching Lillard's contract using the waiver and stretch provision, they're committing to paying him $22.5 million annually for the next 5 years for a player who won't even be on their roster. In an era where teams are pinching every penny due to the new collective bargaining agreement's luxury tax penalties and the second apron restrictions, this represents a staggering financial commitment that will severely limit their flexibility moving forward. And now, it seems that the Golden State Warriors might steal their star player. The Golden State Conspiracy. While most analysts were focused on the immediate implications for Milwaukee's roster construction and Miles Turner's fit alongside Giannis, a more sinister and calculated plan was quietly being set into motion by one of the NBA's most successful and strategically sophisticated franchises. The Golden State Warriors, led by their brilliant front office and the steady hand of head coach Steve Kerr, had been watching the developments in Milwaukee with the patience and precision of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What appeared to casual observers as a simple roster move and organizational misstep was actually the opening they had been waiting for, the crack in the foundation that would allow them to potentially pry away one of the most dominant players in basketball history. To understand how the Warriors positioned themselves for this moment, we need to examine their recent history and the strategic decisions that led them to this unprecedented opportunity. The Warriors have been operating under significant financial constraints due to their championship core's aging contracts and the massive luxury tax bills they've accumulated over their dynasty years. However, rather than panic about their aging roster or make desperate moves to maintain relevance, the Warriors front office made a series of calculated moves designed to create maximum flexibility when the right opportunity presented itself. The first sign that something was brewing came from the subtle but telling interactions between Warriors personnel and Giannis over the past several months. Steve Kerr's public comments about Giannis's game and character have been consistently glowing, going beyond the typical coach speak to demonstrate genuine admiration for the Greek superstar's approach to the game. These weren't casual observations. They were the building blocks of a recruitment strategy that has been months in the making. Meanwhile, Stephen Curry's social media interactions with Giannis have increased in frequency and warmth, suggesting a personal relationship that extends beyond simple mutual respect between elite players.
Yeah, I believe that the best player in the world is Steph Curry. It's still the next player.
I appreciate the compliment.
When you combine this with the Warriors' organizational history of successfully integrating superstar talent into their system, a pattern begins to emerge that suggests this potential partnership has been under consideration for much longer than most people realize. The Warriors' strategic patience over the past 2 seasons now makes perfect sense when viewed through this lens. Their reluctance to commit long-term money to role players, their careful management of trade assets, and their willingness to absorb short-term competitive disadvantages all point to an organization that was preparing for a transformative move. They weren't just maintaining flexibility, they were creating the exact conditions necessary to absorb a maximum contract player like Giannis without completely dismantling their championship infrastructure. What makes the Warriors such a perfect destination for Giannis goes far beyond basketball fit, though the on-court synergies are undeniably compelling. Giannis's background as the son of Nigerian immigrants who faced significant challenges growing up in Greece creates a natural connection with the Warriors' organizational culture, which has consistently embraced players from diverse backgrounds and helped them reach their maximum potential. Steve Kerr's coaching philosophy, which emphasizes player development, tactical flexibility, and maintaining strong team chemistry, would provide exactly the kind of environment where Giannis could continue to evolve his game while pursuing championships. The financial mechanics of how the Warriors could acquire Giannis are complex but entirely feasible, and the organization's front office has undoubtedly been modeling various scenarios for months. Giannis has a player option for the 2027-28 season, which gives him significant leverage in any potential trade negotiations. If he were to make it clear that he would not re-sign with Milwaukee beyond his current contract, Bucks would be forced to consider trading him rather than risk losing him for nothing in free agency, a scenario that becomes increasingly likely given his obvious dissatisfaction with the organization's recent decisions. The Warriors could potentially construct a trade package centered around their younger players and future draft picks, possibly including players like Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and multiple first-round selections. While this would represent a significant investment, it pales in comparison to the potential return of adding a player of Giannis's caliber to a core that still includes Stephen Curry, who despite his age continues to perform at an otherworldly level and has shown no signs of significant decline. What makes this scenario even more plausible is the timeline involved and the urgency created by the current situation in Milwaukee. Giannis's contract situation means that any potential move would need to happen relatively quickly, either through a trade demand or by leveraging his player option to force the Bucks' hand. The Warriors, with their extensive experience in executing complex trades and their established relationships throughout the league, are uniquely positioned to move quickly when the opportunity arises. The psychological factors at play here cannot be underestimated and represent perhaps the most compelling aspect of this potential partnership. Giannis has consistently expressed his desire to win multiple championships. However, his window for achieving that goal is beginning to narrow as he enters the prime years of his career. The disappointment of seeing his organization make decisions that appear to prioritize financial considerations over championship aspirations has clearly affected his confidence in Milwaukee's ability to build sustainable contenders. The Warriors offer not just the possibility of winning championships, but virtual certainty, a guarantee that every season will begin with legitimate title aspirations and end with deep playoff runs. Their track record of maintaining competitive excellence even during transitional periods, their ability to develop players and maximize talent, and their organizational stability provide exactly the kind of environment that Giannis has been seeking throughout his career. And on paper, Giannis would be a perfect fit for the Warriors. Why Giannis to Golden State is inevitable, and what it means for basketball history. The basketball fit between Giannis and the Warriors is so perfect that it almost seems like destiny, as if the basketball gods have aligned the stars to create the most formidable partnership in NBA history. Giannis's unique combination of size, athleticism, and basketball IQ would complement the Warriors' existing strengths while addressing their most glaring weaknesses in ways that would create unprecedented synergies on both ends of the floor. Consider the offensive possibilities that would emerge from this partnership. Stephen Curry's gravitational pull on opposing defenses, which forces teams to commit extra attention to him even when he doesn't have the ball, would create unprecedented space for Giannis to operate in the paint and showcase his devastating combination of power and finesse. Meanwhile, Giannis's presence as a legitimate scoring threat in the post and from the mid-range would make it virtually impossible for teams to trap or double-team Curry without leaving themselves vulnerable to easy scoring opportunities. The pick-and-roll combinations alone would be borderline unstoppable, with Curry's shooting ability creating impossible decisions for opposing defenses and Giannis's finishing ability around the rim providing a safety valve that would guarantee high-percentage scoring opportunities. When you add Klay Thompson's off-ball movement and elite shooting to the mix, along with the spacing and ball movement that define the Warriors' offensive system, you're looking at an offensive juggernaut that would be virtually impossible to defend consistently over the course of a 7-game playoff series. Defensively, the impact would be even more dramatic and would potentially create the most versatile and suffocating defensive unit in modern NBA history. Giannis's ability to guard multiple positions and protect the rim would allow the Warriors to implement switching schemes and defensive strategies that would confuse and overwhelm opposing offenses while maintaining the flexibility to adjust their approach based on matchups and game situations. Combined with Draymond Green's basketball IQ and defensive leadership, along with Klay Thompson's improved perimeter defense and the overall team defense that has been a hallmark of Warriors basketball, this would create a defensive system capable of dominating games through multiple different approaches. They could switch everything and force opponents into difficult individual matchups, could protect the rim with elite shot blocking, or they could force turnovers through aggressive defensive pressure and team coordination. But the implications of this potential move extend far beyond the basketball court and into realms that could fundamentally reshape the NBA as a global entertainment property. Giannis's global marketability and international appeal would combine with the Warriors' massive worldwide fan base to create unprecedented commercial opportunities and marketing synergies that could reshape how the league approaches international expansion and player branding initiatives. The NBA's efforts to expand into European and African markets would receive an enormous boost from having one of the league's most recognizable and inspirational international stars playing for one of its most popular and successful teams. Giannis's story of overcoming adversity and achieving success against all odds, combined with his humble demeanor and family-first approach to life, creates exactly the kind of narrative that resonates with global audiences and transcends traditional basketball fandom. The financial aspects of this deal, while complex, are entirely manageable for an organization with the Warriors' resources, expertise, and strategic planning capabilities. Giannis's contract situation provides multiple pathways for a potential move, whether through a traditional trade or by leveraging his player option to force Milwaukee's hand in negotiations. The Warriors' front office, led by some of the most sophisticated minds in professional sports, has undoubtedly been modeling various scenarios for months and has identified the optimal timing and structure for such a move. Cultural fit is equally important and represents another factor that makes this partnership seem almost inevitable. Giannis's work ethic, humility, and team-first mentality align perfectly with the Warriors' organizational values and locker room culture, which has been built around concepts of selflessness, continuous improvement, and collective success. Steve Kerr's coaching style, which emphasizes player development, tactical flexibility, and maintaining strong team chemistry, would provide the perfect environment for Giannis to continue evolving his game while pursuing the ultimate goal of multiple championships. shifts, the domino effect throughout the rest of the NBA would be absolutely seismic and would force every franchise to completely reassess their championship timelines, roster, construction strategies, and long-term planning. Teams in both conferences would be forced to either accelerate their rebuilding processes or make desperate moves to try to compete with what could become the most talented and well-constructed roster in NBA history. The arms race that would ensue as other franchises attempt to build teams capable of competing with a Curry-Giannis Warriors squad would reshape the entire league landscape and create unprecedented levels of player movement and trade activity. In the Eastern Conference, Milwaukee would be left scrambling to rebuild around Miles Turner and whatever assets they could recoup from a potential Giannis trade, assuming they could salvage anything meaningful from such a transaction. The financial burden of Damian Lillard's stretch contract would severely limit their ability to attract premium free agents or take on additional salary in trades, potentially condemning them to years of mediocrity despite their recent championship success and the organizational infrastructure they've built. The psychological impact on the Milwaukee fan base and organization would be devastating. This is a franchise that has experienced more heartbreak and disappointment than almost any other in professional sports. And losing Giannis after he delivered their first championship in 50 years would represent a level of organizational failure that would be difficult to recover from both emotionally and financially. Meanwhile, teams like the Boston Celtics, Philadelphia 76ers, Miami Heat, and New York Knicks would suddenly find themselves in a much more favorable position to compete for Eastern Conference supremacy. The removal of Giannis from the East would create a massive power vacuum that could lead to increased parity and more competitive playoff races, fundamentally altering the conference's hierarchy and creating opportunities for franchises that have been operating in Giannis's shadow for years. In the Western Conference, the implications would be even more dramatic and far-reaching. Teams like the Denver Nuggets, Phoenix Suns, Los Angeles Lakers, and Sacramento Kings would face the daunting prospect of trying to overcome what could become the most talented roster in NBA history. The pressure on these franchises to make their own blockbuster moves would be enormous, potentially triggering a series of trades and acquisitions that would reshape the entire conference and create unprecedented levels of competitive imbalance. The Denver Nuggets, despite having reigning MVP Nikola Jokic, would find themselves in an almost impossible position trying to compete with a Warriors team that would have superior talent at virtually every position. The Lakers, already struggling with an aging core and limited assets, would be forced to make increasingly desperate moves to try to salvage whatever remains of LeBron James's championship window. The historical significance of this potential move cannot be overstated, and we could be witnessing the creation of what would undoubtedly become the greatest team ever assembled in the history of professional basketball. We would be seeing the formation of a dynasty that combines proven championship experience with generational talent in a way that has rarely been achieved in any professional sport, let alone basketball. The Warriors dynasty, which many thought was winding down as their core aged and faced increasing competition from younger, more athletic teams, would instead be entering its most dominant and historically significant phase. The addition of Giannis would not just extend their championship window, it would potentially create a period of dominance that could last for the next half-decade and redefine what we consider possible in terms of sustained excellence in professional basketball. For Giannis personally, this move would represent the ultimate validation of his incredible journey from selling items on the streets of Athens to becoming one of the most dominant forces in professional basketball. His story of overcoming adversity, fighting through poverty and discrimination, and achieving success against all odds would reach its crescendo with multiple championships alongside one of the most successful organizations in sports history. The legacy implications are absolutely staggering when you consider what this partnership could accomplish. Giannis already has 2 MVP awards, a championship, a Finals MVP award, and a Defensive Player of the Year award to his name, but joining the Warriors could elevate him to a completely different tier of basketball immortality. The opportunity to win multiple championships while playing alongside Stephen Curry, one of the greatest players in NBA history, would cement his place among the all-time greats in a way that staying in Milwaukee and hoping for organizational competence simply cannot match. The stage is set, the players are in position, the circumstances have aligned perfectly, and basketball history is about to be made in the most spectacular and unprecedented fashion imaginable. The Golden State Warriors and Giannis Antetokounmpo are destined for each other, and the basketball world will never be the same once this inevitable partnership becomes reality. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.